Okay, welcome back. We are going to jump right into a session that's going to help us run our meetings a bit smoother. I know a particular problem that many of us have is we go into these meetings hoping to establish or come up with some sort of plan or intervention that's going to allow us to solve whatever the problem is that we're working on. But too often it deteriorates relatively quickly to a venting session, or it goes astray, um, or it just it didn't produce the intervention that we were looking for. And so teachers' time is not valued because they see this as a waste of time. Your time's not valued. And most importantly, the kid doesn't get the best possible intervention, or the school doesn't get the best possible planning. So there's lots of ways to manage meetings and to run with meetings. Some of them are very convoluted and center on how to take notes. Others are very prescribed time frames. All of those work really well. I would encourage you to look at some of Sprick's work if you're interested in looking at some of those meetings, especially from a behavior point of view. But what we've developed is a very down and dirty mnemonic that allows you to cue in when you're running a meeting, to be able to say, okay, these are the steps that we're going to take. And once that structure is in place, and you'll probably meet with some resistance to begin with because it's somewhat awkward, and you might find yourself, um, kind of resisting it a little bit because it's not how you naturally would do things. But when you evaluate, was the product better if we ran it through this scenario as opposed to if we just did it a regular way? And what the session is centered around is the IFSaM model, and it's a short number of steps. I don't like these 5-page forms on just running a meeting. Um, and it doesn't utilize a lot of technology. There's a lot of apps out there for the iPad that structure a meeting, but I find all of them somewhat cumbersome, and we lose focus, which is why are we here? What's the purpose of this meeting? And where do we want to be 20 minutes from now? Hopefully we have a solution. And it's not just therapy for some individual that's having a particular problem. So the IFSAM model has 5 steps, well, 4 steps. One is being able to identify, 2 is determining a function, 3 is a solution, and 4 is then to monitor. And if you can practice this, and it's fine to go ahead and have a cheat sheet, or actually have a piece of paper, and you can use the mnemonic. It helps a great deal. But what it does, it imposes an order on things, and it guides you through that structure, and you'll find your meetings a bit more efficient. So let's dive right into it. First off, we want us, when we're, whatever the problem is, whether it's a particular student or a teacher problem, or it's a system problem or an environment problem, we want to make sure that we're reflective, not reactive. If you go back and you reflect some on the maybe the not stellar moments in your career, I would say that it was probably a byproduct of a reactionary decision that you made, as opposed to when you sit down and you reflect, you're usually much more effective, and a much more robust and a much more workable solution comes into play when we reflect. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to love the solutions when we are reflecting, but what it will do is that you stand a better chance of being effective. And if you have this pattern of being effective, then it sets the tone that you are definitely an efficient leader, which just builds all sorts of confidence in your staff. Also, too, there's this need for many of your staff members to not be in a free-for-all meeting. It has to be purposeful, it has to be structured. And there is also a need for those individual um, teachers who utilize meetings for their own personal reasons, to have an out, so that you can, if somebody is being counterproductive, there's a way, without directly going after that person in a public forum, to bring them back in line. So the IFSaM can be a very good friend of yours. First thing is that, again, the purpose is we want to be much more reflective in our leadership, less reactive while we're making these decisions. So in a problem solving session, you want to identify the problem, and that's the first. The first step in any of this is being able to identify that problem. And while that seems somewhat simplistic, we generally don't spend a lot of time, articulating what is the problem. And because that problem is not identified, people go off and they think they know what the problem is, but because it's not explicitly defined in observable, measurable terms, people go off and start coming up with solutions to problems that they think they've identified, but the person beside them has identified it in a much different way. And we start finding, collaboration breakdown because we're not getting each other. And so you really can solve that problem by spending a little bit of time identifying what this problem is. What are we working on? Our projected goals for math were, 85%. We obtained a 72% in 30% of our classes. It can be that specific. Or we are writing 20% of our behavior referrals in the hallways. Our aggressive behaviors have increased 30%. We are seeing teacher turnover at 42%. We need to identify what problem. Why are we at this table? If it's just an information gathering session to relay stuff or to collect, then state that purpose, and IFSaM is not necessary. But if you're coming to the table to solve a problem, you got to identify it. You got to say in observable, measurable terms so that everybody understands it and everybody's on the same page. And it really just kind of takes a couple minutes, get it up on a piece of paper. What problem are we trying to solve? Let them write it, let them come up with whatever, and get rid of those subjective words and then nail it down into something very clear that everybody agrees this is the problem that we're working on. And as people, when you have that identified, this is a problem that we're working on, and people want to go into a different area, that's when you can bring up those parking lot issues, a very good issue, but not really pertaining to what we are talking about today. It goes up on another sheet of paper, and you can label it parking lot. That way nobody feels minimized by their input and say, look, this is a very important topic, but let me put this in the parking lot for right now, and we'll come back to it. But right now we need to focus on the problem that we've identified. Okay? So the next step in this is determine the function. A lot of times what we do when we identify a problem, we go straight into solutions. Because, by our very nature, many of us are problem solvers. And as administrators, a lot of times we get a lot of credit if we're quick on our feet and we come up with a lot of solutions and people look at us to be the solution generator. And so, while yes, that can work to your favor. It also, a lot of times, if we don't spend any time on function, why is this a problem? What is that individual getting or avoiding by engaging in a particular behavior? Why are kids, not going to class? Why are we seeing aggressive behavior? Why is this occurring? Why is this occurring? Why are teachers leaving our school division? What are they getting by leaving or avoiding by leaving? And we spend a little time on that, and stay away from a lot of the societal kind of issues, but we spend some time. What are they getting? Is the fighting a byproduct of power? Or is it attention? Because people get in fights for, lots of reasons. Some because they like the attention they get for it, or it's a way of getting power, or it's a way of escaping, or revenge. Spending a little bit of time on what those functions are, why those students engage in those particular behaviors, why the teachers engage in it, why are we seeing some of these? Spending time on function. At this stage in the meeting, a lot of times people come up with justification. So they identify the problem and they want to jump into treatments way too quickly. Get them, as the leader, relax, see where they're going, and ask them to think about what is this person getting or avoiding by engaging in this situation. Why is this teacher, you know, not pushing students? Why are we writing so many behavior referrals? Why? What is that function? And sometimes the function is hidden. We don't know. But if you do spend, and one of the benefits of really just spending some time on function, it makes us more reflective, less reactive, more reflective, and that's one of the main goals for IFSaM. Is we want to reflect, and sometimes we don't know, and sometimes the evidence isn't in right there. We can't do an FBA on every kid or every problem, but if we do spend a little bit of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, on just discussing the function, it makes people much more reflective. And a lot of times, if a kid is engaged and we do identify the correct function, we could have two different people engaged in the exact same behavior, but for very different reasons. And so our treatments, if we want to be effective with both of them, have to address the function, not just in controlling the behavior or the choices that individual make. Because ultimately, we really can't control people. We can influence their choices, but we really can't control them. So function is a critical component. Clearly, there's other functions than just the attention, power, avoidance of failure, and revenge, but it's a good place to start. It's a good place to start. And again, even if you don't identify the function because it's a bit hidden, it does allow you to reflect on that behavior. Now, once you've identified the problem and possible functions, then we start generating solutions. Okay, and I generally say just link them to the function. If we are kicking back and the individual is, um, you know, coming up with solutions that are not linked to the individual problem, then we need to make sure that we bring it back as administrators to, some sort of, all right, here's the problem. Here's the function that it's aligned with, and here's the particular solution that we're going to come up with. Solution phase is just really critical. It's that wonderful time when we sit back and we say, we're going to solve this problem, and there's a lot of enthusiasm that goes with it. Unfortunately, that enthusiasm dissipates because we go on and on and on about it. And we don't get why we're doing certain things, or it's a canned solution that is the flavor of the month. So link in our solution. What are we going to do? And who is responsible for what and by when is critical. So the solutions not only are going to be an agreed upon intervention that is linked to function, if at all possible, but who does what, when, is critically important. Just having that down on paper. All right, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Here's our solution. Okay? What is my responsibility? Provides me with a lot of security, and it's going to make your staff feel much better about your leadership, because once you come up with a solution, then there's a product, and there was a reason for this meeting. And a lot of times what people do is they stop right there. They've identified the problem, they talked about function, and they've come up with a solution that has a time frame. And they forget that they need to monitor this. We think something's going to work. If you think of other professions, every time they implement something, they immediately start collecting data to see if that intervention indeed worked. But in education, a lot of times we don't. We'll come up with some solution and we kind of think that hopefully it will work, but we don't have any systematic monitoring process. So we've got to spend a little bit of time on, okay, we came up with this intervention, how are we going to monitor? Simple as if it's referrals that are written and it's too high, then clearly we're just going to monitor it by looking at the referrals to see if they have dropped. Starting class on time, we're going to see many more teachers starting the class on time if our intervention worked. Attrition, job satisfaction, self-efficacy, all of these can be measured if we have linked it at the beginning when we identify the problem. The monitoring is a key critical component, and so we often forget that. So when we're coming up, the final step is, okay, what data are we going to collect to see if this is working, and when are we going to report back? So the IFSaM is a really down and dirty. We identify the problem in observable, measurable terms. We come up with some sort of function that is linked to the problem. What are they getting or avoiding by engaging in this? We come up with a solution that is definitely linked to the function. And then we come up with some sort of way to monitor this whole process. There's a couple tips that when you're trying to work this through is spend some time making sure that you really have a common language, that everybody understands what these critical words mean, and they're all on the same page. Make sure that you're thinking in terms of function. What is the teacher getting or avoiding by acting this way? Because two teachers, they really could be engaged in the exact same behavior, but for two very different reasons. And so therefore their treatment, if we expect to be effective with both of them, must be different. Align that function with the treatment, align the treatment with the function, and realize that you might have very different treatments for different people, even if their function is the same. Reflection is the key variable here. It is going to make you a much better administrator than someone who just rides by the seat of their pants. So utilize IFSaM. If you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to contact me. Take care.